Let's talk about shutter speed and how it affects photos. Welcome to Pixzilla. My name is Ken, and I'm a professional photographer of over 20 years. If you want, you can check out some of my work in the links in the description down below. In this video, we'll be talking about shutter speed and how it affects photography. So let's get started. First off, let's talk about what shutter speed is. Shutter speed is the amount of time that the shutter of a camera is open when taking a photo. It's usually measured in fractions of a second, such as 1/60th of a second, or 1/125th of a second, or 1/1000th of a second. The longer the shutter is open, the more light that can enter the camera. That means that if you use a slow shutter speed, you'll get an image that's brighter. But however, it could also mean that your subject could be blurry if the subject is moving a lot. On the other hand, if you use a fast shutter speed, you'll get a darker image, but it could also mean that you might have a sharper image because it might freeze the motion of the subject. In fact, a huge tip for beginner photographers: if your photos aren't sharp, most likely your shutter speed is not high enough. So try increasing your shutter speed. That should help eliminate motion blur and camera shake. Yes, that's right, camera shake. You can actually shake the camera a little each time you take a picture. So how do you choose the right shutter speed? It really depends on what you're trying to capture. If you're shooting wildlife photography, such as a bird in flight, or maybe you're a NASCAR photographer, you'll definitely need a higher shutter speed to freeze motion. But if you're shooting product photography, and let's say the product is stationary on a table, or maybe you're shooting landscapes where mountains don't move very much, you probably can get away with a much lower shutter speed. That said, you have to be careful about camera shake. A slow shutter speed could result in camera shake, which can still cause your images to be blurry, even if your subject is stationary. I can tell you, in my 20 years of wedding photography, there have been so many times that it was me that was the problem when I was moving too fast or shooting too fast for my own good, and caused a lot of pictures to come out blurry. So to avoid this, 2 pro tips. Number 1, shoot slower. And when you shoot, take a burst of photos. Usually the first picture is going to be a little bit blurry as you press down the shutter button. But when you take a burst of photos, the second, third, maybe even the fourth picture may be very sharp, as you eliminate camera shake. And the second pro tip is, if you can, shoot with a tripod or put your camera on a stable surface. Sometimes you could also buy lenses with image stabilizer built in, or even cameras with image stabilizer built in. That helps to eliminate the camera shake. Once you've mastered shutter speed, you can control it to create some very artistic elements in photos. So that's about it for the lessons for basics on shutter speed. The main points are that shutter speed affects the amount of light that enters the camera and controls the freezing of motion. Remember, slow shutter speeds let more light in, but also don't freeze motion as well. It also suffers from camera shake problems very often. Fast shutter speed, however, lets less light in, but freezes motion better. And there's also less camera shake. So here's a small slideshow of images that show you how different shutter speeds affect how motion appears in the image. And keep in mind when you're looking at these pictures that, like the aperture video, what you're not seeing is the relationship of the shutter speed to ISO and aperture to control the exposure. We'll get into that more in another video. Also, in a future video, we'll talk about how shutter speed and flash lighting are related to each other, so stay tuned for that. So that's it for this video on shutter speed and how it affects photography. If you enjoyed this content and found it useful, please do give it a thumbs up. That really helps us as we try to grow this channel. If you have any questions about shutter speed, please don't hesitate to leave me a comment down below. So thanks for watching and happy shooting!